everybody, and welcome to today's panel discussion on caregiving, advocacy, and community leadership. I'm Dr. Adriana Schnell, and it is really my pleasure and my honor to be moderating today's panel. I lead the Koschitzky Center for Innovations in Caregiving at Baycrest. And prior to that, I was the program director of Baycrest at Home in charge of clinical programs. And I managed the senior support programs at Baycrest and the seniors counseling and referral programs. And I was practice chief of social work at Baycrest. And prior to that, I was a clinician, a social worker by training. Because of my interest, love, and my career that I've spent in caregiving, I went back to do my doctorate in 2009 to specialize in caregiving, and in particular, dementia caregiving. And so it is fitting that I moderate today's panel with two very knowledgeable, experienced, and truly remarkable people in the field of caregiving. And they're experts, because of what they've experienced. So without further ado, Cindy, please go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit of what brought you to this current path.
Thank you very much, Adriana. My name is Cindy McCaffrey. I'm a co-founder of UQuest, and it's a charity based in Calgary that supports younger people with dementia, so people under age 65. And how I got into this is because 14 years ago, my husband, John, was diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia at the tender age of 48. And at the time, there were no services or supports for us except for a caregiver support group. And I went to that group and was very thankful to meet other people going through this nightmare experience. One of the care partners told about how his wife, who was very active as a hiker and gardener, had to be put into care because he had to go downtown to work, and home care wasn't allowed to stay with her all day, and they weren't allowed to take her out gardening or hiking like she wanted. So he had to place her in a facility. She hated it there. She banged on the windows and the doors to get out, to go get some air, to get the sunshine. And she was hauled off to the hospital where she was restrained to the bed and heavily sedated. And the man in our group just said, if only someone had taken her outside for a walk, I'm sure she would have worked off that anxiety. And our group was stunned. We didn't say anything. We all looked at each other. We knew that that could be our loved one getting hauled away to the hospital. So that is the main inspiration for filling this service gap for younger people with dementia. I was interested in caring not just for the people with dementia, but for the care partners, because I watched my own mother-in-law die from the stress of caregiving. Her husband also had young onset Alzheimer's, and she died at 59 and he died at 62.
Thank you so much, Cindy. Ron.
Thanks, Adriana, and greetings, everyone. I'm Ron Boleno. I'm over here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And I was a caregiver. Some people will use the term carer or care partner, depending where you're at. But I was a caregiver to my father for over 10 years, who lived with dementia, specifically Alzheimer's disease, from 2007 to 2018. So just over 10 years. I am an only child, and part of that, I think, plays a role, I guess, in how I pursued my caregiving role. As that only child, growing up, I actually was always looking to take on challenges, and dealing with dementia as a caregiver is pretty much a life with many, many challenges. So myself, along that way, I actually got involved with a few organizations and groups. One specifically, the Center for Aging and Brain Health Innovation, CABI, where you're attending this conference here. So I am on the Seniors Advisory Panel, representing a caregiver voice as one of those. I am also with AgeWell, known as Canada's Technology and Aging Network, where I co-chair the Older Adult and Caregiver Advisory Committee. And both AgeWell and CABI do a lot of work with innovators in coming up with solutions. So I am a solutions-oriented person. So that's kind of the connection that I have with these two groups. I am involved. I do advocate a fair bit, and we are going to be talking about advocating community leadership from the caregiver perspective today. One other group that I'm with right now is Healthcare Excellence Canada, where I am a coach on a few of their portfolios. One is Reimagining Care for Older Adults. So kind of ideal timing right now there, Adriana and Cindy, like that we're dealing with the pandemic, is that even though before the pandemic, caregiving and caring for older adults, we knew that there were issues, but the pandemic has opened up that opportunity to actually make more people aware and possibly advocate even further. And it's kind of tricky how we do that. So one last group I'm just going to throw out as well here in Canada, Dementia Advocacy Canada, which I'm part of. I believe, Cindy, I think you're also part of that. So Dementia Advocacy Canada, which are the voices of people living with dementia as well as their caregivers, care partners. So those are a few groups that I'm with. And again, it just happened to be that there was a point where I was kind of, I'm going to say it here, kind of pissed off along the way that I needed to find better solutions. And as much as there's people that care, caring isn't enough. We need to actually come up with solutions. We need to voice out our challenges, our opinions, advocate. And again, some of us, many of us, have better opinions and skills than some of those that are still just trying to figure it out. So that's where I'm coming from there, Adriana.
Thank you. And I hope that you all realize that as you're listening to Cindy and Ron's stories about how they've become advocates over time, that I wouldn't want people to think that they became advocates overnight. There's a journey to caregiving. And in the initial stages, it may not look like this. And do you want to perhaps both of you or whoever is interested in responding to this around where you see yourself now and what you've experienced as a caregiver and the amazing advocacy group that you both do? Was it the same at the beginning of your caregiving trajectory?
You can go ahead, Cindy. I'll let you.
I don't think it was the same. When I first started, I was mostly doing it out of fear that I didn't want John to experience some of the horror stories that we had heard of. I knew that we needed families, maybe 8 or 10 families, to have a place to get together. But I didn't really think of it in terms of balancing all of the family needs and the economic needs and the spiritual needs. I didn't think of it as a complete package, whereas now I do. And I think that's just a matter of growing with the families and finding out what they need and want.
That's interesting. Thank you.
And I'll add to that last words that Cindy, you said about growing. Okay. So this is a lot about growth. That is growth personally, individually. Okay. If you are that caregiver, care partner, that is growth for the person you're caring for. And that's growth for that, either that dyad or that care team together. Okay. This is not static. It's not the same. And many I don't even, let's just start with caregiving there, Cindy and Adriana. Many don't even realize that they're now starting to grow into that role of caregiving. Okay, many times you're just the son, you're the daughter, the partner, the husband, wife, okay, or the grandchild, let's say. So you have a different label, and then you start getting to the caring piece. Oh, I'm starting to care, and then you attach that label, maybe if you choose to, as that caregiver, and then along that way, a lot of these are challenges. We're just dealing with a lot of challenges to get through life. Those challenges aren't the same at the beginning. Those challenges aren't the same at the end. Advocating is where, not everyone has to be an advocate, and I think that's something we want to share as well, I believe, is that there's different levels of advocacy, but I always believe that you have to start, at least speaking up when you say, okay, why are we getting services like this? Or how can we make this better? That alone, just questioning things, is advocacy, in my opinion. And then eventually some start speaking up a little louder. They decide to, hey, I could actually do something differently here, or I could influence how something is being done, whether that's an innovation, whether that's policy, whether that is just services, even acknowledging the great services out there, that's again, like Cindy, I know with UQuest, what you provide, like a lot of places don't have that. So advocating, I believe you grow into that. And it's just a question of once someone becomes conscious about that, it's up to them to, if they want to grow into it even more. And again, it's not new. Okay, so caregiving is not new. Other people have gone through it. Okay, but for those that are going through it for the first time, they might just realize, geez, I don't know how to do this. And sometimes you have to advocate to kind of just hear the other stories. And then maybe you advocate to change how the game is being played. So there's a growth. Yeah. So that's a key word, I believe. And we're still growing. Cindy's still doing it still now, right? But for me, I count myself as a post caregiver to my father. Okay. Now I still care for my mom who lives independently and quite well on her own, but for dementia, I'm a post dementia caregiver is the term I'm going to use. And I still have chosen to continue advocating at a high level.
Right. It's funny to talk about the different levels of caregiving because I look at myself and I say, well, I support him. Whereas I do more than just support. I actually do a lot. I don't have to do his activities of daily living, but he's turned over finances to me, and that's not my thing, really. And just decision making is hard for John. So I'm making more decisions during the day, even over little things, but it all adds up. And when you put it on top of your job, the 9-to-5 job, it is a lot more than I had anticipated. And I'm still early on in this caregiving stage with him because he's still independent and at home.
So Cindy, you brought up a good point that caregiving is not just the act of caring physically for somebody and feeding somebody or dressing somebody. It is so much more complex than that. And it involves the emotional piece. It involves taking on so many new different roles that before, in partnerships, couples, or anybody, you generally split duties. Nobody can do it all. It'd be really overwhelming. And all of a sudden here, you have to wear both hats. And that's one of the difficult things about caregiving, that it's insidious in nature. So you don't, and as Ron, as you said, you don't necessarily realize you're becoming a caregiver and all of a sudden you're in this role. And sometimes it takes somebody else, a healthcare provider, to tell you or call you a caregiver. And you look at them and it's like, what? I'm not a caregiver. You're a caregiver. I'm the son. I'm the wife. Right. And like you very well pointed out, it is really quite a journey to even come to terms with, oh, I'm a caregiver. And you can still be a wife or a son and a caregiver and an employee and a parent and everything else. The other point I want to pick up on is when you talked about advocacy, and there are different levels of advocacy. And nobody should feel that because you're not involved in some organization or some committee work, that you're not an advocate. Because advocacy is hard work. And in many ways, why should caregivers have to be advocates for themselves? Where have you seen such a thing? Really? And yet you guys can speak to this better than I can, why you've had to become advocates. Like, was that a need?
So my view is, I know we use the term caregivers here, and usually if you're a caregiver, there's another person involved. Okay. So, but I always start off with, when it comes to caring, you have to start with yourself first. Okay. You have to advocate just for yourself. So this is not even caregiving for someone else. You have to find a way to take care of yourself up in life. Okay. And a lot of people, have challenges with that. I've had my challenges, in different parts and stages of my life, but I've worked hard to find a way to care for myself. Now, when you're responsible or you're taking responsibility to care for someone else, and as you said there, Adriana, we use different definitions, like people don't look at it as caregiving sometimes. There's this cultural piece, cultural caring, okay? And sometimes, well, priority goes to you have to take care of someone else. But I've always said, this is maybe in my lifeguarding days, that I can't help someone else if I'm not safe first, if I'm not taking care of myself. There are going to be days I'm going to, be down, or I'm going to be struggling, but I have to find a way to care for myself. Otherwise, two of us are going down, okay, or more of us. So part of that is advocating for yourself and having your voice and sharing your voice of what you need. So that to me is quite important, that advocating is first and foremost is actually advocating for you, the individual, okay, whatever you call yourself, and that maybe not wearing the hat of a caregiver, but just you have to kind of also make sure you don't lose yourself if you can. It's easier said than done for many, but it is something that I always believe. I never looked at myself always as a caregiver. I was also that innovator. I was that person that was out there being physically active, having fun in relationships and friends and all that. So it's not always just a dementia caregiver. I try actually not to label myself that, but I knew I was that on some days.
Thank you.
Cindy, how about you?
I would never have expected to be in the public eye as an advocate like 10 years ago or 15 years ago. So I think it's because there is just this urge to make things better for families, because I've seen how families can be destroyed through dementia and not getting support. As I mentioned with my mother-in-law, and especially with the younger families, you're seeing a lot of the kids get in the middle of this and they're not finding the support they need. So for me, advocacy it's been a great way to grow, and it's been a great way to help people, but I just wish that we could do it faster and with more depth somehow.
And it's small steps, right? Small increments. But having been in this field for over 30 years, I see the huge difference in the conversations, in some of the policies, and we're by no ways doing amazingly well. But in comparison to 30 years ago, there's been huge strides made. And maybe you can let us know a little bit about, and both of you, in terms of if you had to think in terms of supports or policies, whether small or large, what would you like to see implemented?
I'm a big fan of Caregivers Alberta, and I think it's important to rely on a professional organization like them to fan out and help the families. They already have the resources, and they're excellent resources. One that they have is Compass for the Caregiver, and it's a short course, and I've taken it, and it's excellent. And I wish that somehow we could bring that course into the workplace, maybe through insurance companies or HR companies. I'm just not even sure how it would be done, but it reminds the caregivers, yes, you are a caregiver, but you do need to take care of yourself. And here are some practical ways to do it.
So on my end, I'm actually going to talk here to, I think, a fair bit of the audience. In this audience probably are a lot of caregivers, older adults, but also innovators. I think this crowd, there's a fair bit of innovators here, but also people that work in policy, possibly with government, healthcare. For me is reshifting, and it's been happening, you're correct there, Adriana, over the years, the value of the voice of the caregiver, the person with dementia, the older adult, okay, those who we're trying to support and service, in the end, their voice is actually huge. And we've been getting to the tables so that I could say, okay, well, people are accepting us. Can we do it easier? Yes. Can we value them at the tables even more? Okay, I think that that's important. So part of that means not necessarily just getting any caregiver out there. Okay, Cindy and I are at different stages depending on the project, but don't just get a caregiver, a person with dementia, an older adult, just to cross off something on the checklist. Okay, we have them at the table. Okay, it's actually valuing them. Okay, giving them that time. They're the ones that have spent so many hours, many times not by their own choice, to try and go through all these pain points and all these successes that you're trying to get as an innovator or in the healthcare system. And sometimes, I joke when I sit at a table, I'm saying, who here is getting paid and who's not? And many times the one who's speaking, they want the most information from would be the caregiver or the other person that actually is not getting maybe an honorarium or a stipend. So I'm suggesting at minimum, try and get their voices, give them the value, the time, to actually acknowledge and have the time for them to speak, but also offer. Doesn't mean it's mandatory. So a lot of us are not doing it for the money. Like, it's not to make a living as an advocate, but it is something where it's say, you know what, for your time, here's a gift card, you can take it or if you don't want it, some kind of honorarium or something like that, a stipend that is kind of standard, but it's optional. Again, some do not want to accept it. They could donate it off somewhere. So I just believe valuing their voice is a little better there. And that's a key word for me. Are you actually valuing, them to be at the table?
And Ron, you bring up quite a few important points. I mean, this idea of how in our society we value a group of people. We give money for your time. Your time is worthwhile, so we compensate you for it. And so we've traditionally not ever thought of compensating caregivers or any we would consider as volunteers. And yet there's nothing of the volunteer about caregiving. In fact, you are the experts and you should be compensated. And what that compensation looks like varies. But it's a fact that you are heard, the fact that you're seen, the fact that your voices matter. It's not people at the table making the decisions and just saying, okay, Ron and Cindy, please sign off on this because we decided that this is what we're doing. Actually listening and not listening, but doing something about it and valuing the time, because I think you're absolutely right. I mean, in Canada, there's a few tax credits, but overall, we don't pay family caregivers for their time. Other countries do. Mm-hmm. And what does that say? The first time in Canada that we started paying caregivers, family caregivers, has been through COVID.
Yeah.
And it's the first. And maybe that's going to change, move the needle moving forward. What are your thoughts about areas where we can move the needle? And we only have a couple minutes left, but if you had to choose one area, what area would that be?
For me, I would just expand on what I mentioned before about the workplace. I think that if managers could be more accepting of caregivers, there'd be a lot less stress.
And I'll just add to that, the employment community, as well as actually innovators, coming back to the innovators, is that you actually value the time and offering some kind of return, to the caregivers as well. So that's what I'll be suggesting here.
Thank you, both of you. Very important, valuable points. I'm very sad that we have only 25 minutes because this discussion is it feels like it's just starting. And I hope that for all of you watching this and participating, that you start thinking of some of these ideas and incorporating into the work, into your lives. And very happy to continue this discussion moving forward. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, not just for presenting today, but also for the incredible work that you do day in and day out and you've been doing for so long.
Thanks, Adriana.
Yes, thank you.